Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Alicia.
What did it feel like to meet Nadia again?
I think that encounter seemed a little quick. It happened. I think it's interesting. I think the encounter was fun. And I think sometimes it's okay to have shorter encounters. It's my sense, because there didn't seem to be anything I was necessarily missing, even though when I watched it again, it seemed kind of short. But I'm not really sure what I would have done differently, because I wasn't getting any signs of distress from her. She seemed connected. She seemed better. Doesn't always work that way. More often than not, I think the person hasn't gone to the therapist. And then I'm really building in time to just think with them about, how to not feel ashamed about that, and kind of spend some good time with them so that something feels good for them, and then come up with a new plan, whether it's just with me or with another attempt at a therapist. But I think with her, it seemed okay, and maybe that was enough. I don't know. What do you think?
You know what I thought? I was giving it a mental health perspective, and I was thinking, Alicia, Freud said that even a cigar is sometimes only a cigar. And what I thought is, maybe we shouldn't see too much into is being brief. But from a mental health perspective, there are two things that stood up for me. One is, it's as if she was saying, Eddie, you gave me what I needed. And right now, my energy is going to be in the therapeutic space. And so I am choosing to use you as a primary doctor, and I am choosing to use the therapist as a therapist, and keep the two realms separate.
Yep.
And I think that's perfectly appropriate. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, this is a little bit, I don't know how appropriate this is, but my dad is kind of a negotiator. And he always had the saying growing up that, when you get what you want, shut up and leave. And, and because sometimes you can over-explain something and then create problems where problems didn't exist. And so I don't know if that directly applies here, but I think, there wasn't much more to be done in that moment. She wasn't really asking for more. I asked her if there was anything more that I needed to do. And so, I could have asked her exactly what they talked about in therapy, or why she liked the person, or, exactly what her life is like that's different right now. But I think the truth is, I probably needed that time for my next patient who, is in the middle of addiction and is not really even open to talking about it, let alone going to therapy. And so, there comes there's a very big reality in medicine where we have a finite amount of time, and we may want to really focus on somebody else, because unlike therapy, we don't have a designated amount of time with them. And so I think you're right. I think she was okay in that moment, and I could, affirm her, and set up another follow-up just to make sure things are going as well as I thought they would.
That's right. I think that you really got her going in the direction that she found useful for herself. Yeah. And the joy with which she said, better, was, I think, a confirmation that what happened in the previous session was exactly what needed to happen.
I guess I have one clinical question for you as a therapist. Sometimes when people say, I saw in there when she said she's better, I said something like, wow, I really like the sound of that. And the question I have for you is, she probably likes the sound of that too. So that was a good, that I wanted to just recognize that. But I don't want to communicate to her that if she's feeling badly, that I don't like the sound of that. And so I wonder how you navigate celebrating successes without sending a subliminal message that if you're worse, that's a failure.
Yes. My analyst once said, you cannot do everything in one sentence. And patients remember that you said this, and that you said this, and that you said this, and they integrate it. And in the last session, you said to her, and if things get worse, give me a call, I'm here. Mm-hmm. So relationships are cumulative, right? We build them over time. And I think that celebrating her the way she was celebrating herself was what she needed at the time, and that is where you met her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what you point out about her also taking in the fact that I acknowledged that she could get worse is somewhere in our relationship too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One other thing from a mental health perspective, if it's useful, is that sometimes after a major step forward, there is some retreat, some avoidance, some sense of, we were so intimate that I need to restore a little bit of emotional distance. Mm. And that might have been something that she was experiencing, because the previous session was really quite deep. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a part of her that recognizes that you are her primary care doctor, and that if she opens herself too much to you, at some point you would need to curtail it. And so she chose to follow your advice and connect with a therapist that she likes, which is in itself a wonderful thing and not to be taken for granted. And I think you intuitively gave her that privacy by not asking her questions that she might have felt like she needed to answer to please you. Mm-hmm. But where she was kind of feeling like her energy would be going to the therapeutic space now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. No, I appreciate it. I think the permission to celebrate, be positive. Some of us like to get into the weeds, and so I think sometimes not doing that is probably better. And then I think there's a certain permission to have shorter encounters that, to me, I've always been agitating to have longer, more in-depth encounters, because I think that is actually where a lot of healing occurs, but that those aren't always necessary. Mm-hmm. And it's also quite adaptive for us to give us the permission to have a short encounter and not extend them unnecessarily, so that we can kind of function in our roles with other patients.
I also just want to acknowledge that there are times where we do feel disappointed, where it's hard to give up the intimacy that we created with a patient when the patient is going in their own direction in a way that we encourage them to go, but where that means that we lose that special connection, or that special connection becomes less intense. And it's a little bit like seeing one's children grow, right? And love somebody else more than they love us. It's like we're still their parents, but now they have a love partner. Sometimes it's you know, one celebrates it for them, but we miss it for ourselves.
Yeah,
And
no, I relate to that a lot. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I relate to that in that sometimes my comfort zone is in the intense weeds of things and less in the celebratory kind of quicker encounters. And
mhm,
that's really what I was thinking about it in terms of comfort zone, but I think it's probably because I find a lot of meaning in those intense encounters. And those intense encounters aren't always necessary or helpful.
the equivalent in mental health is when a patient really gets better and they terminate treatment. And we have invested so much, know them so intimately, and we miss them. We learn a lot from them too.
Yeah.
So it's just the inevitable chiaroscuro of relationships, right? That intimate relationships have their ways of being time limited in professional settings.
Yeah. Well, I hope I'm challenged with that issue more often in my practice. It'll be a sign I'm doing better work.
Yes.
Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you.